Sweden, this is Democracy Now!
Right now we are facing an existential crisis. The climate and ecological crisis, and it will have a massive impact on our lives in the future, but also now, especially in vulnerable communities. And I think that we should wake up, and we should also try to wake the adults up, because they are the ones who, their generation is the ones who are mostly responsible for this crisis.
Greta Thunberg has arrived in Lisbon, Portugal today after a nearly 3-week journey across the Atlantic to attend the UN Climate Summit in Madrid, Spain. We're broadcasting from the place where her school strike for climate began, Stockholm, Sweden. Greta will be honored here Wednesday with the Right Livelihood Award, widely known as the Alternative Nobel Prize. We'll speak with another Swedish high school student who'll accept the award on Greta's behalf. And today is the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. We'll speak with Ethiopian disability rights activist Yetnebersh Nugusi. She received the Right Livelihood Award in 2017. She's been blind since she was 5.
The reason I won it was on my innovative approach to call for inclusion instead of specialized services for persons with disabilities in Ethiopia.
Then, as the UN Climate Summit begins in Madrid, we'll look at the place it was originally supposed to be, even before Chile. It was Brazil. In one of far-right President Jair Bolsonaro's first acts in office, he canceled the summit. Since then, there's been growing violence against indigenous forest protectors in the Amazon. We'll speak with Fiona Watson of Survival International, whose group won the Right Livelihood Award years ago. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're on the road in Stockholm, Sweden. The Washington Post reports House Democrats are debating whether to extend the impeachment inquiry against President Trump beyond the central allegation that he withheld military aid from Ukraine in order to pressure the Ukrainian president to investigate Trump's political rivals, the Bidens. Members of the House Judiciary Committee are reportedly considering drafting articles of impeachment that would also include obstruction of justice and other high crimes outlined in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report. The lawmakers are also considering including articles of impeachment charging Trump with trying to profit off the office of the presidency. The Intelligence Committee is scheduled to vote today to send its final report on Ukraine to the House Judiciary Committee. President Trump again lashed out at the impeachment inquiry while speaking to reporters in London during a NATO summit today. Trump also began the 2-day NATO meeting by criticizing French President Emmanuel Macron, who had suggested European states could no longer rely on unwavering support from the United States. Trump and Macron are slated to meet later today. California Republican Congressmember Duncan Hunter will plead guilty in federal court today in a campaign finance violations case. He's accused of misusing $250,000 of campaign money for personal use, including to finance numerous romantic affairs with congressional aides and lobbyists. His wife, Margaret Hunter, already pleaded guilty to conspiracy to misuse campaign funds in June. Hunter has not said whether he'll resign from his congressional seat. Hunter was an early supporter of President Trump and tried to claim the charges against him were a witch hunt before deciding to plead guilty. The U.S. Supreme Court is slated to hear arguments today in a case that pits about 100 Montana residents against the oil giant BP, one of the largest companies in the world. The residents are demanding the Atlantic Richfield Company, which is owned by BP, clean up decades of arsenic pollution from a massive copper smelter. The company's arguing It's only required to clean up the site to Superfund standards. The case could have sweeping significance for other Superfund sites across the United States. In the Philippines, 500,000 people were forced to evacuate their homes as the powerful typhoon Kamori swept across the archipelago. The airport in the capital, Manila, was closed for 12 hours, grounding hundreds of flights. At least one person was killed. Authorities are now warning of deadly landslides and storm surges from the rainfall. Scientists say climate change is intensifying the strength of typhoons. Meanwhile, in Madrid, Spain, protesters gathered outside the first day of COP25, that's the UN Climate Change Summit, to demand urgent action on the climate crisis. This is Blanca Lagunas.
Today we are here in Madrid because COP25 is starting, where leaders and multinationals are going to make decisions about our future. We have joined together from more than 20 countries for this Extinction Rebellion protest, calling for real solutions. We are giving leaders an ultimatum, and we are asking them to tell the truth and find real solutions.
Democracy Now! Will be broadcasting live from the UN Climate Summit beginning this Friday and all next week. In Iran, Amnesty International says at least 208 people were killed in Iran's brutal crackdown on nationwide protests last month, but that the true death toll is likely much higher. The protests erupted after a massive increase in fuel prices. Iran sought to suppress information about the deadly crackdown by imposing a near-complete internet shutdown across Iran. In Honduras, 7 men were sentenced to up to 54 years in prison for the 2016 murder of indigenous environmental activist Berta Cáceres. Cáceres was fighting the construction of a major hydroelectric dam on Lenca indigenous land when she was shot to death in her home in March of 2016. She was the winner of the prestigious Goldman Prize for Environmental Defenders in 2015. A court has ruled Cáceres' killing was ordered by executives of the Honduran company behind the dam, known as DESA, who hired the convicted hitmen to carry out the killing. At least 2 of the men involved in the murder were trained by U.S. military forces. This is Berta Cáceres' daughter, Berta Zuniga Cáceres, speaking outside the court in Tegucigalpa.
The road to justice does not end here for us because impunity will not end with the sentence for the main perpetrators of the crime. We continue to demand integral justice, including all people involved in this crime, to be tried and put away.
Honduras is one of the most dangerous countries in the world for environmental activists and land protectors, with at least 24 environmental leaders killed since March 2015. In more news from Honduras, the TV host Jose Arita was murdered last week in the northern coastal city of Puerto Cortes, shortly after the broadcast of his nightly political show, The Hour of Truth. 4 unidentified individuals in a car shot at Arita outside a convenience store, killing him instantly. Their motives unknown. The Honduran College of Journalists says over 80 journalists have been killed in Honduras since 2001, and at least 8 in 2019 alone. The murders, many of them, are unsolved. In Guatemala, another former top military official will be tried for genocide and crimes against humanity committed during the 36-year U.S.-backed Dirty War, which killed over 200,000 people, mostly indigenous Mayans. Luis Enrique Mendoza Garcia was a military operations chief under now-deceased military dictator Efraín Ríos Montt. He'll be tried in March for his involvement in an operation that killed over 1,700 Maya Ixil people and displaced thousands more in the early 80s. Mendoza Garcia is the 4th top military official indicted in less than a week after 3 others were also charged in a separate genocide case, also involving the Maya Ixil community. The White House has quietly released $105 million in military aid to Lebanon after months of unexplained delays. Top lawmakers have been asking the White House to explain why the military aid was not delivered earlier, despite having been approved by Congress and supported by the Pentagon. Some lawmakers have compared the delay to the withholding of military aid to Ukraine, which is at the center of the impeachment inquiry. Although there are no allegations, President Trump sought favors from Lebanon. Multiple women are demanding Prince Andrew testify in U.S. court about the sex trafficking he witnessed in the home of serial pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. As an American woman who says she was trafficked by Epstein and forced to have sex with Prince Andrew when she was 17, gave an explosive interview on the BBC. This is Virginia Giuffre.
It was a wicked time in my life. It was a really scary time in my life. I had just been abused by a member of a royal family. So when you talk about these chains, I wasn't chained to a sink, but these powerful people were my chains. I didn't know what could happen. And I couldn't comprehend how on the highest levels of the government and powerful people were allowing this to happen, not only allowing it to happen, but participating in it.
Giuffre says she was first lured into Epstein's sex trafficking operation while she was working as a locker room attendant at President Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. Prince Andrew has rejected Giuffre's account. He's been forced to step back from all royal duties. The Washington Post reports healthcare industry lobbyists help write or revise opinion articles published by at least 3 state lawmakers that criticized Medicare for All. Montana Democratic State Representative Kathy Kelker and State Senator Jen Gross both included language in their opinion articles that was written by a lobbyist for a multi-million-dollar industry group funded by private insurers and drug companies. Ohio Republican State Senator Steve Huffman also wrote an article criticizing Medicare for All with the help of an industry lobbyist. And in Detroit, about 90 foreign students of a fake university created by the Homeland Security Department have been arrested in recent months. The students arrived to the United States with a student visa that was later revoked because it was revealed the University of Farmington in Metro Detroit was a fake college. Since January, a total of at least 250 students have been arrested by ICE, that's Immigration and Customs Enforcement, on immigration violations as part of an operation by the federal government that lured international students, mostly from India, to attend Farmington University, which marketed graduate programs in computer studies and technology. Many of the students arrested have been deported to India, while others are appealing their deportation orders. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're on the road in Stockholm, Sweden, where we're covering the 40th anniversary of the Right Livelihood Awards, widely known as the Alternative Nobel Prize. This year's award recipients include 16-year-old Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg, whose school strike for climate started right here in Stockholm, where she began standing outside the Parliament building every school day to demand bold climate action more than a year ago, when she was 15. Her act of resistance soon became a global movement, with millions of youth around the world leaving school and taking to the streets to demand swift action to halt the climate crisis. Greta Thunberg is not here in Stockholm for the awards ceremony. In fact, she just arrived in Lisbon, Portugal today after a nearly 3-week-long journey by boat across the Atlantic Ocean to participate in the 2019 United Nations Climate Change Conference. That's COP25 in Madrid, Spain. She was on her way to Santiago, Chile, where the climate talks were supposed to be held when Chilean President Sebastián Piñera canceled the conference amidst mass anti-government protest. It was then rescheduled to Madrid, causing Greta to reverse course and head back to Europe. Greta and her father, Svante, sailed aboard the 48-foot catamaran La Vagabonde, refusing to fly because of the high carbon footprint of air travel. In September, I sat down with Greta Thunberg in our Democracy Now! Studio in New York. She explained how she launched the school strike for the climate last year.
The more involved I got in the climate movement, the better I feel, the happier I feel, because I feel like I'm doing something important, something meaningful.
So talk about what happened, what you did just about a year ago now. You were 15 years old. You went in front of the Swedish Parliament every single day at the beginning?
Yeah. every school day, not Saturday and Sunday, but every school day for 3 weeks until the upcoming election. And then that was my plan to stop after the election. But then on the Friday, September 7th, that's when Fridays for Future started, because then I thought, why not continue? Why stop now when we are actually having an impact? So then I and some other school strikers thought that we should go on, and we should call it Fridays for Future, and we should be on Fridays.
That's 16-year-old Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg speaking earlier this year in Democracy Now! Studios in New York. Right now, we're in Stockholm, where she began her activism. The Right Livelihood Awards ceremony is taking place here on Wednesday. In a statement, Greta said, quote, "I'm deeply grateful for being one of the recipients of this great honor, but of course, whenever I receive an award, it's not me who's the winner. The Right Livelihood Award is a huge recognition for Fridays for Future and the climate strike movement." So we're joined right now in Stockholm by El Jarl, a climate activist who's marched with Greta Thunberg here in Stockholm. She's an 18-year-old high school student who began participating in the climate protests last December. Along with other youth climate activists, El will accept the Right Livelihood Award on Greta's behalf. She is an activist here with Fridays for Future Sweden. Elle, it's great to be with you here on this first day of our broadcast in Stockholm, for you to be our first guest to place us in the place where you and Greta have really helped to lead this movement that has gone global. Why did you get involved last December?
I got involved because I read up a lot about the climate crisis, and it was such a big problem, and I wanted to do something, and I wanted to help make a change in the world. And then I saw that she was striking, or my father showed me, and I was like, that's something I can do. And it seemed to be making a change, and people were talking about it. So then I went and I stuck around. So
I should say, as we're speaking here, your pal Greta is in Lisbon. She's just made landfall. And she is about to actually speak. Others are speaking first at the news conference. And if she does begin to speak as we're doing this segment, we'll go directly live to her. Your father's a scientist?
Yes, he is. So I've always grown up with lots of scientific talking around the house, and it's made me really curious to learn more.
What do you think of our president, President Trump in the United States, saying climate change is a hoax?
Well, yeah, listen to the United Science. It's out there, and it's their responsibility to read up and educate themselves, all leaders of the world.
So that's what you were telling Swedish parliamentarians when you joined Greta on the steps of the Swedish parliament. How did the MPs, how did the members of parliament respond to you? How many were you in last December?
When I first joined, there were about 30 people there that day. Well, most of them don't say much. They ignore us, or quite a few of them just walk by the strike. Others, yeah.
And what has it meant to you that this has gone global? That so many young people are going out on Fridays, leaving school, and demanding change?
It's fantastic. I mean, I joined just before the movement fully exploded. So I really saw the change, and it's spreading to more and more places around the world. And it's something that my generation needs. We need to say enough and force action to a fair future. And we are doing that now.
So you've been outside the parliament week after week, but then were you invited inside to address the parliament?
No, we haven't been.
Ever?
No.
So what is it like for you to see Greta addressing the European Union, addressing the United Nations?
It's really powerful that we are just teenagers, but we managed to speak to all these people, world leaders, and hopefully make them listen. and make them change. And I hope that COP25 will manage to do something important.
I want to turn right now to the opening of the UN Climate Summit in Madrid. Will you be going there, by the way, to the summit?
I sadly will not be going.
This is Antonio Guterres, who is the UN Secretary General.
What is still lacking is political will. Political will to put a price on carbon. Political will to stop subsidies on fossil fuels. Political will to stop building coal power plants from 2020 onwards. Political will to shift taxation from income to carbon, taxing pollution instead of people. We simply have to stop digging and drilling and take advantage of the vast possibilities offered by renewable energy and nature-based solutions.
That's Antonio Guterres speaking in Madrid, Spain, at the beginning of the UN Climate Summit. What message do you have for world leaders?
Listen to what the science is saying. We need to drastically reduce our carbon footprint and take care of our environment. It's your responsibility to do that and not put it on us. We can't wait any longer.
And what will you be saying at the Right Livelihood awards ceremony tomorrow on Wednesday?
Well, we will, of course, we are very grateful for this, but we need politicians to take action, and we will keep fighting. And yeah, that's what we will say.
You helped write an article, an op-ed piece?
Yeah, together with the Right Livelihood and Fridays for Future Sweden, we wrote a debate article about Sweden and the politics we are having now.
Mm-hmm. And what did you say in it?
That we are really far away in Sweden from the goals or where we need to be to reach the Paris Agreement, or yeah.
And what are you demanding specifically should happen in Sweden?
We need to reduce all of our carbon emissions, and we need to create a fair change and help everyone change their jobs to more environmentally friendly.
I wanted to turn right now back to Greta Thunberg in the New York studios, and when I asked her about her message for young people.
The message to the young people of the world is that right now we are facing an existential crisis. The climate and ecological crisis, and it will have a massive impact on our lives in the future, but also now, especially in vulnerable communities. And I think that we should wake up, and we should also try to wake the adults up, because they are the ones who, their generation is the ones who are mostly responsible for this crisis, and we need to hold them accountable. We need to hold the people in power accountable for what they have been doing to us and future generations and other living species on Earth. And we need to get angry and understand what is at stake, and then we need to transform that anger into action and to stand together united and just never give up.
So that's Greta Thunberg in our New York studio. When she first arrived in New York, when she first took a zero-emissions sailboat across the Atlantic to New York. I want to turn right now to Portugal, to Lisbon, Portugal, where a young climate activist is speaking before Greta addresses the crowd, where she's also just landed.
My name is Beatriz.
My name is Matilde.
We are here in representation of Fridays for Future in Portugal, Greve Climática Estudantil. First of all, we'd like to give a warm welcome to Greta and her crew, and we hope you enjoy Lisbon and your Caldo Verde.
We I'm here to present Greve Climática Estudantil and, sorry. We are a youth movement that fights for climate justice. We fight for climate justice because our house is on fire. And because our house is on fire, we've organized and striked for the climate together with thousands of students many times this year. Our demands are simple. In Portugal, we need to reach carbon neutrality by 2030. We need to keep fossil fuels, including gas, on the ground. We need to provide clean energy for all. And we need to cancel new airport projects, Montijo included. Because we need a system change, not a climate change. We are still far from winning. We know that change disturbs the ones in power. They tell us our country's ambitions in climate policies, but we know it isn't. They tell us they are doing what they can, but we know they're not. But we also know that this is the struggle of our generation, and we will not give up. We all have raised like a wave to demand climate justice for all. And we need everyone to join us. If we lose, everybody loses. Now we are, like Greta, heading to COP25 in Madrid. We'll meet with thousands of other climate activists from many countries, including the Global South. There, we'll be protesting once again against the priority given to profit over our lives. The seas are rising, and so are we. Greta, thank you for having inspired the youth. Thank you for being radical in your speech. Thank you for showing politicians and corporations that will no more accept the climate chaos they've provoked. Greta, don't stop. Because together we are going to change the system and demand climate justice for all. We are the ones we have been waiting for, and we will put out the fire in our house. Thank you and welcome.
Now we have a brief remark, because social justice is climate justice. We have a brief remark from Abel Rodrigues from Amazonia.
Thank you, everyone. Hello, Greta. Welcome to Lisbon. Hello, everybody. So my name is Abel Rodrigues. I'm from Amazon rainforest. And basically, I want to say that the world needs to know that the Amazon rainforest is being killed by corporations, by injustice corporations. And I have to say to the world that the people from Amazon rainforest are being killed every day, and the world needs to know this. I want to say very thankful to Greta to be the biggest and most active voice in this battle. And I want to ask for all of you, we need to save Amazon rainforest, please. Please. Thank you, everyone.
You've been listening to the news conference that's being held as Greta Thunberg has made her way to Lisbon, Portugal. We're going now to return to that news conference which Greta will be addressing.
I hope that we all, in whatever way we can, whether it's sailing across an Atlantic, looking after your child, traveling around America, researching, however you want to do it, I hope that by working together, we can do it in a much easier and better way.
Thank you. Now, Greta Thunberg.
Well, first of all, thank you everyone so much for coming here and for welcoming us. It feels very good, doesn't it, to be welcomed in such a way. So thank you so much, and of course, thank you to Elena, Riley, Lenny, and Vicky for making this possible. And I owe you so much. And just thank you, and thank you everyone else who has been helping us for making this possible. And
I'm so grateful for having done this trip and for having this experience. And I am so honored to be here in beautiful Lisbon and Portugal, and thank you so much for having us here. And also, after a trip like this, for being isolated 3 weeks, for being in such a limited space with such limited things to do, you get very relaxed in a way. You are disconnected from everything and everyone, basically. And for coming into land, it is so overwhelming. So I think all of us are still a bit overwhelmed. So you will have to bear with us, and especially having all these people greeting you. It feels amazing, but our brains are not used to it yet. And it feels so amazing to be home back in Europe. I have been on quite an adventure, and we've all been on quite an adventure. And it feels good to be back, and of course I, as well as the other climate activists, we will not stop. We will continue to do whatever we can. Continue to travel around and to put pressure on people in power, and to make sure that they prioritize this highest, and then eventually we will be going to COP25 in Madrid, and we will continue the fight there to make sure that within those walls the voices of the people are being heard, and that the voices of the future generations are being heard, and that the voices from the people, especially from the global south, are being heard. And I don't have much to say, just that we are facing a global emergency, and we need to see it from a holistic point of view, and we need to do everything we can. We need to work together to make sure that we secure future living conditions for humankind, and that we fight for not only ourselves, but for our children and for our grandchildren and for every single living being on Earth. And everyone has to do everything they can in order to make sure they are on the right side of history. Because in order to change everything, we need everyone. And I hope every one of you will get active and start fighting for your future as well. And once again, thank you to these people, to Riley, Lenny, Elena, and Nikki for doing this. This trip has been great. Actually, I think we needed some relaxing time, all of us, especially me, some time to sort of think everything through and to relax. And now I feel good. I feel like I want to continue now. I feel energized, and
That's Greta Thunberg speaking from Lisbon, Portugal, where she has just made landfall. after a 3-week catamaran journey with her dad and another family aboard La Vagabonde. This is live television, and we're broadcasting from Stockholm, Sweden, where Greta began her climate strike. We're on television, we're on radio, we're on the internet at DemocracyNow.org. And I welcome you and your friends and family to join us on this journey as we are here in Stockholm, Sweden, where Greta began her climate strike more than a year ago. She will be winning the Right Livelihood Award tomorrow here in Stockholm. But instead of her being here, other of her sister and fellow students will be receiving the award. We want to thank El Jarl, who is a school striker, part of Fridays for Future Sweden, who will be receiving that award here in Sweden, while Greta makes her way to Madrid for the UN Climate Summit. When we come back, today is the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. We'll speak with the Ethiopian disability rights lawyer Yetnebersh Nugusi, who received the Right Livelihood Award in 2017. She's been blind since the age of 5. Stay with us. The Captain by The Knife, a Swedish band, here on Democracy Now!, DemocracyNow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Stockholm, Sweden. Before we make it to Madrid on Friday, where we'll be broadcasting for the next 6 days. Next week, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed will be awarded the 100th Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo for his role in brokering a historic peace deal between Ethiopia and Eritrea. While in office, he's lifted the state of emergency in Ethiopia, released thousands of political dissidents from prison, and appointed women to a record half of the cabinet positions. The Nobel Peace Prize is the one Nobel not awarded here in Stockholm, where Democracy Now! Is for this week, for the 40th anniversary of the Right Livelihood Award, also known as the Alternative Nobel Prize. This year's Right Livelihood Award winners are Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg, who you just heard as she made landfall in Lisbon, Portugal. Also, the Sahrawi human rights activist Aminatou Haidar. You'll be hearing her later in the week. Chinese women's rights lawyer Guo Jianmei. She won't be joining the Right Livelihood ceremony. And Indigenous leader Davi Kopanawa and the Yanomami Hutukara Association, which protect the Amazon's biodiversity and indigenous people. Former award recipients from around the world have gathered here to honor these incredible activists, including Yetnebersh Nugusi, a lawyer and disability rights activist from Ethiopia, director for advocacy and rights as Light for the World, and is the former chair of the Ethiopian National Association of Blind Women's Wing. She's been blind since the age of 5. In 2017, she was awarded the Right Livelihood Award. She's joining us here at our studios in Stockholm as we mark this International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Yeti, thanks so much for joining us here. It's an honor to have you with us. Talk about your activism. What got you started?
Thank you, Amy, and it's so amazing to be live on this Democracy Now! Well, as you mentioned, I got blind when I was 5. Then I was born and raised in rural Ethiopia, where the fate of a girl child is to get married early. So I was no more considered valuable in that community because I was not fit for marriage. But my mom and my grandma made sure that I get education, but I got a special education in a special school for the blind. So that was very good, and we were only 60 girls and 60 boys, only 120. As I joined the government school after grade 6, because the special school could not afford taking us in, I realized that I was different. So we were 76 in a classroom, but I was the only blind girl and I was the only blind student. So it was different for the students. They were not happy to sit with me, so I had no friends until I got into the first semester. So I realized that I was special, and I realized that I had to work more, I had to excel more to be considered normal. So that's the passion, and that's the time when I started my activism, that I am just different like you, and I want just the same rights as you want, and I want equality. So that's where my activism starts and still going on. Unfortunately, disability-based discrimination is a global phenomena. It happens in the US, it happens in Asia, and I'm just coming in from Turkey, where I was speaking in an event again on inclusion of persons with disabilities. So it's a global phenomena, and it's growingly that the rights of persons with disabilities being violated, and every day their quality of life is significantly deteriorating. So it's about becoming the voice. You not only went to the schools of Ethiopia as an undergraduate, but you became a lawyer. Yes, I became a lawyer because I decided, as I grew in that I'm different, I decided that it's my human rights to be included, and people should know more about their rights and their duties. So that's where I decided to study law, and I am one of the first 3 blind female lawyers in the country who decided to study law. Can you talk about what rights are enshrined in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities? You know, it's very interesting because the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities has only come to entry into force in 2010. It was adopted in 2006. So many people think that it contains new rights. Unfortunately, that's not the case because all the rights in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities did exist before. The problem is nobody took action on them. So it's the same rights which were enshrined in the Child Rights Convention, in the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. So it's all the same rights. No new rights are in the convention. So it's about like all the rights that we persons with disabilities want are the same like others want. Like we want our rights to education the same like other children. We want our right to health, our right to access to justice, a right to be kept free from violence, and everything. So one historical development or evolution that this convention has brought through is that it combines the human rights and the humanitarian law together because of its Article 11. So it's just human right as any other human being, but it gives a special emphasis, and it also guides us to how those rights can be a reality for persons with disabilities. Can you talk about being a woman with disabilities and what that means? Yeah, it's interesting because women are also among the minorities where they didn't get where they want to be because of social attitude. So when you have a disability and when you are a woman, then the stereotype that you fight with becomes double. So unfortunately, there are more women with disabilities internationally, according to the World Disability Report, but you don't see them quite often. Like you don't see them in leadership in the disability movement, you don't see them in the women's movement. So they look to be missing from both very crucial and vibrant civil rights movements. So it's clear that there are more women with disabilities, but they're not yet empowered. They're not visible enough. And I would hope, especially next year with the Beijing Plus 25 in 2020, I would hope that there will be a breakthrough to really recognize and make this section of the community more visible. Here we are in Stockholm. In Oslo next week, your Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, will be receiving the 100th Nobel Peace Prize next week. Talk about the significance of
him receiving this award. And then I want to ask you about an appointment he recently made of you to chair the Reconciliation Commission.
Yeah, it's very interesting that our prime minister is winning, and I think he's the first Ethiopian. And the fact that he's number 100 is also something significant. However, as the Nobel Peace Prize Committee also announced that he is undertaking a work in progress, because normally this kind of prizes do not come simply as an achievement recognition. They also come as a recognition of your efforts. So, yes, he has contributed to the peace between Ethiopia and Eritrea, and of course, he has done a number of positive actions towards realizing peaceful Horn of Africa as a region, and so on and so forth. But it's also clear that he is still confronted with a number of challenges when it comes into peace in the country, and also sustaining development and fair and democratic society in the country. But I believe that this is a work in progress, and I'm so happy that he's receiving this. And I hope it also signals the message that this award, this prize, is not simply for Ethiopia, but this I would think that this is a prize for Africa, in particular for the region Horn of Africa. And in particular, we have to say that this is a prize which goes both for the Ethiopians as well as for the Eritreans. For peace takes two. Whereas conflict, you can be one is enough for conflict, but for peace at least it takes two. So it's an award and recognition for both Ethiopia and Eritrea as a country, and of course the leaders, Dr. Abiy, as well as President Isaias as president of Eritrea.
Can I ask you about the criticism of Dr. Abiy weeks after the announcement of the Nobel Peace Prize that he would be receiving it? He came under harsh criticism over his silence in the face of protests that police said had resulted in the deaths of 67 people. Explain what happened.
Yeah, it was unfortunate that, even though a number of reforms have been gone, still we're facing a number of challenges in Ethiopia. And of course, internally, it looks like that we have newly emerging conflicts among people. So that has happened. And as you said rightly, that the government was being questioned for the silence. It's true that there are things that he has achieved, but that doesn't mean that he has finished his homework, or that doesn't mean that Ethiopia has been fully back into peace. So that is, again, a message that we need to do things differently if we really want to achieve peace in the country.
And what does it mean that you're going to be head of the Reconciliation Commission?
The Reconciliation Commission is part of a transitional justice, as you know, and it was formed last beginning of February. So the government has appointed around 41 commissioners, which I am one of the co-chairs to do. So with this reconciliation concept, we are supposed to serve four main purposes. First is to investigate what has happened in the past. Second is to recommend and also recognize victims who have suffered because of the injustice which has happened in the past. Third is, of course, making sure that common truth is created. And fourth is, of course, making sure that those kind of conflicts do not recur again. So the commission is very infant and very new, and the reconciliation process itself in Ethiopia is for the first time. So we are undertaking a number of preparatory actions to make sure that we open up for receiving complaints from the citizens.
Finally, Yetna Berish Academy, what is it?
It's my own private school initiative. As I told you, I went to a special school because children with disabilities were not allowed then to go to regular schools. However, now with the education policy becoming open for children with disabilities to join regular schools, private schools were resisting to take in children with disabilities because they associate disability with poverty. So I decided that I become an entrepreneur, and I opened the first private school which can welcome children with disabilities because of the understanding that I believe that I'm just different like anybody.
And finally, you talk about the importance of children with and without disabilities, or with different abilities, we'll put it that way, continually interacting.
Yes, I believe that's the most natural way of teaching inclusion, because children are just innocent. They're just white papers. We are the ones who teach them who is higher, who is lower, who is different, and who is more powerful and who is less powerful. So if children play, grow and learn together, we don't have to do all the artificial work of inclusion, convention, and so on and so forth. So I believe that's a natural garden to teach inclusion.
I want to thank you so much for being with us. I look forward to our public conversation tomorrow here in Stockholm. That will take place just before the major Right Livelihood Award event. And at that event, I will be speaking to Edward Snowden, not live in person, yes, live, but he is in political exile in Moscow, and he also is a previous Right Livelihood laureate. Yetna Beresh-Nugusi, I want to thank you so much for being with us, lawyer, disability rights activist from Ethiopia, director of the Advocacy and Rights at Light for the World. In 2017, Yeti was awarded the Right Livelihood Award. When we come back, as the UN Climate Summit begins in Madrid, we look at the place it was originally supposed to be, even before Chile, Brazil, where there's growing violence against indigenous forest protectors under the far-right President Jair Bolsonaro. Stay with us. My Own Memory by Mulatu Astatke, the Ethiopian musician. This is Democracy Now!, DemocracyNow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We are broadcasting from the studios of Stockholm's Open Channel, Stockholm's only independent grassroots non-commercial TV station committed to free speech. The Open Channel here in Sweden carries Democracy Now! 4 times a day, and it's great to be with our colleagues here. Well, the United Nations Climate Summit, known as COP25, opened in Madrid, Spain, Monday. It's supposed to be held in Santiago, Chile, but the Chilean government canceled the summit amidst massive protests against economic inequality and austerity. But even before Chile, this year's UN summit was supposed to be held in Brazil. In one of far-right President Jair Bolsonaro's first acts in office, he canceled the summit. His foreign minister has described the climate change as a Marxist plot. Since then, there's been growing violence against indigenous forest protectors in the Amazon. Last month, an indigenous forest protector named Paulo Paulino Guajajara was shot dead in the Amazon by illegal loggers. Guajajara's death came a month after human rights groups warned in an open letter the Amazon's last uncontacted indigenous people face genocide amidst raging fires and mounting incursions into their territories. Well, for more, we're joined in these last few minutes by Fiona Watson, Advocacy and Research Director for Survival International. That's the group that won the Right Livelihood Award back in 1989. We welcome you to Democracy Now! It's great to see you, Fiona. We only have a few minutes right now as we played live Greta Thunberg making landfall in Lisbon, Portugal, making her way to the UN summit. But talk about what the indigenous people of Brazil face right now.
Well, the indigenous people in Brazil are literally on the front line, and we've seen with the death of Paulo Paulino Guajajara, an Amazonian forest guardian whose group of people were standing up to the loggers and the invaders. They are paying literally with their lives. They're also paying with their livelihoods and their resources. Their lands are being plundered. Invasions of indigenous territories since Bolsonaro took power are up by 40% since last year. Deforestation is up 92%. So these are really shocking figures, and things look set to get worse because Bolsonaro's agenda, he's made it quite clear, is a very racist agenda against indigenous peoples. These are the people who, as Davi Kopanawa, who is a winner of this year's Right Livelihood Award, a Yanomami Indian, says, the indigenous people are not only standing up protecting the Amazon forest for themselves, but for humanity because of the crucial role it plays in helping to regulate climate change.
Talk about uncontacted tribes. What does that mean?
That means people who live mainly in the Amazon region, who have no contact with surrounding society. They may have sporadic contact with neighbouring tribes, but very little. These are usually people who, several hundred years ago, have escaped things like, say, the rubber boom, the atrocities, the enslavement. So it's a means of self-preservation and protection to choose to live as far away as possible in isolation. And these are the most vulnerable people on the planet. And under Bolsonaro, they are coming under increasing attack. We just heard a few days ago that the Indigenous Affairs Department of Brazil, FUNAI, has brought out a bill saying that employers who their field staff are supposed to protect indigenous peoples and monitor the territories of uncontacted will not now be going into territories that have not been recognised officially. That means at least 10 uncontacted groups are now severely at risk of attack.
Can you talk about the significance of the Right Livelihood Award? Back when your group, Survival International, got it in 1989, and now this year, in fact, just after this broadcast, we're going immediately to interview Davi Kopanawa, who, together with the Hutuqara Yanomami Association, are receiving the award this year at the big ceremony on Wednesday here in Stockholm.
I think it's a very important award because what it does is it recognises people who aren't generally well known, who are working all around the world, grassroots communities, all sorts of people who are fighting for a better world, for social justice, etc. So by getting this award, it gives them a platform, an international platform. And in today's globalised world, that's extremely important. And it acts like a big family. So there's a lot of sort of rich, if you like, sort of cultural mixes within the Right Livelihood family. And when Survival won it in 1989, we in fact invited Davi to accept it on our behalf in the Swedish Parliament. And this brought huge attention onto the Yanomami issue because they were facing genocide. 20% of their population died in 7 years in the late 80s due to a gold mining invasion and the diseases that the miners brought in. This was genocide, and it brought that issue to the public. And from that, after that, their land was recognised.
And the significance of Bolsonaro cancelling the UN summit this year in Brazil. Now it'll take place in Spain, where we're headed in the next few days.
I think that says everything. Here is a person, this far-right guy, who denies that climate change is happening, who has a very racist agenda, who calls indigenous peoples lazy, dirty, in the way of so-called progress. In fact, these are the people, I think, who are crucial to the future of our planet, who have this tremendous knowledge, and they are the ones who are standing up, fighting for a better world for all of us. We must support them.
I want to thank you so much, Fiona Watson, with Survival International. The group won the Right Livelihood Award in 1989. That does it for our show. We'll be broadcasting from here in Stockholm for the next 2 days, then on to Madrid for the UN Climate Summit. Special thanks to Stockholm's Open Channel for hosting us here. I'm Amy Goodman. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. Thanks so much for joining us.